Absolutely. There's really no doubt in I think anyone's mind that this was a horrible mistake. Just like rushing the next gen car was also a horrible mistake. What they did with no practice. When you have pretty much every single driver in the field complaining about it, maybe not complaining for lack of a better term, but like saying something like, "Oh, maybe we should have done this." It's time they need to listen to the drivers. Like when Denny Hamlin, three-time winner of the Daytona 500, even is saying, "We need some practice in these cars." You should probably give them some practice. And I think it was definitely a huge mistake. Hopefully next year around this time we'll be able to see practice, even if it's not televised. Get the driver some practice because it's you don't want to see like Chandler Smith. I had the wrong Smith. There's a lot of Smiths in the field now. But when I'm watching my TV, getting excited to see Colleague Racing started off, and Chandler Smith's just like you can't park there kind of like meme where he was just chilling on the track because he couldn't get the car going. You don't want to see that. And that probably not would have happened. Probably would have not happened if they allowed practice, especially for guys who are making their cup debut, which there's a few of them. So yep, I think it's a terrible mistake. Maybe not the worst they've ever made, but it's definitely up there in the most recent memory.
Well, we went through this during the pandemic with teams, falling out during the pace laps or whatever, with issues that they'd be able to diagnose if we had just as much as a single lap of practice to get out there and test these cars. And again, I'll go back to who we were just talking about, Travis Pastrana here. The guy has done one lap at speed to qualify, and now he has to go out and race in a pack that admittedly isn't a full size field here. But, this is somebody who, like I said, did a full season of NASCAR almost a decade ago. He's done some one-offs at Vegas with Nice and a couple of other things in the trucks. But I gotta think he would be jumping at the opportunity to, be able to get his car at least shook down and bring it out on track for a couple of practice laps at bare minimum before, you get out there in the duels. Get the opportunity to learn the draft a little bit with these next gen cars. And he's far from the only one. We've got a couple of guys trying to make their Daytona 500 debuts here. Certainly the open cars, a lot of them driving for smaller teams. I think practice would have been very, very valuable. And I think the voice of a three-time winner of this race in Denny Hamlin, in comments that he made on his podcast, wondering how in the world do we not have a single lap of practice before we qualify and have the qualifying races for our biggest race of the year. And you compare it to what the Indianapolis 500 used to be, and in a lot of ways still is. I know they have the Grand Prix the second week in May now, and it's not the full month that it used to be, but you still have hours and hours of practice and rookie orientation and all sorts of stuff before you qualify for that race. Why isn't NASCAR following suit here? So I understand that there was the argument during the pandemic in particular that, teams don't always see practice as that valuable in many areas. And maybe it's best if we do away with it for the time being to try to save the team's money. I think we're past the point of pandemic restrictions now. That isn't really a valid excuse anymore. And I think for a lot of these younger drivers and more inexperienced drivers and teams in particular, there's a lot to be gained, particularly before your biggest race of the year. I think not having a single lap of practice is definitely a bizarre circumstance that they've been forced to deal with. Now, in complete fairness, everybody's dealt the same hand of cards here, but at the same time, I think that's something that they need to look at changing for 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, Ben, totally agree with you. I think NASCAR did make a mistake by not having a lap of practice. Like you were saying, you can't use the excuse of the pandemic anymore, like why we're not having practice. And Denny Hamlin's absolutely right. It's inexcusable for the biggest race of the year, not even a single lap of practice before going out there to lay down a lap to try to at least get on the front row for the Daytona 500, or at least get a good starting spot for your duel. I don't understand why NASCAR decided to go into qualifying without a lap of practice, but I have a feeling next year we'll probably see at least a short practice before going to qualify. And all of these issues with Chandler Smith and Connor Daly, if they would have gone on track in practice, they could have diagnosed those issues ahead of time, and they wouldn't have had an issue later on in qualifying.